Hello. So my name is Tokki. I'm a former player development coach across multiple scenes of contenders through a couple different regions. Spent time working with players from as low as gold to working with players that are now sitting in current owl. I want to go over a couple things that have to do with Tracer. More specifically, I want to look at kind of more the niche mechanics side of Tracer that gives you either leg up advantages in one-on-ones, absorbing duels properly, or just overall increasing your threat to a larger scale through the entire lobby, building leverage properly for your team. Blink usage. I think this is probably where we're going to start. I'm definitely going to put timestamps in these videos so that you can kind of like skip through to maybe usages that you want to or mechanics that you want to find that are going to benefit you, maybe that you feel like you're personally struggling, and kind of give you more of like a baseline or a rule of thumb. I think it's important to say that obviously like what I'm going to be presenting you today is taken with a grain of salt or like rule of thumb, especially going into a lot of this stuff, because like with Tracer, right, a lot of it's going to be these mechanics are necessarily either prevalent or like the decision making of how it goes into and how it affects your fights generally. So when you're looking at blink usage, generally there's an idea or a concept is that you generally hold 4 to 5 blinks per fight. Now you're probably going like, okay, 4 to 5 blinks. This generally makes sense as like an average with like recharge. So if we're gonna break this down, right? Okay, so generally your first blink is gonna be travel. Anything that helps you get around the map, set up angles, get yourself into spots that help set pinches. You could even theoretically say that there are areas where like second blink has viability, but generally this is something that we try to avoid. Outside of this, this is where we start to see like recharge factors come in. Combat. So generally your second and third blink as recharges happen, if we're going to look at this in the aspect of, okay, how do blinks play, right? Well, you're always going to have recharges coming up. So you have your first blink, you have your second. This is generally your third because of recharge. So you have 1, 2, 3. If you avoid using first blink for setup, you're able to get in on time, or they're walking in your pinches. You might actually have 4, where that fifth blink, which actually technically has a 6th recharge if you're playing your blinks and your times properly with your life. This would be comboed with recall. This is usually in combination with recall, so this happens usually somewhere between. These are kind of like your, how you say, like your oh shits. So we kind of have a general layout here about how we want to look at these now getting played. So when we look at these and see how these generally apply to your fights, these are pretty standard, right? Let's say if we're looking at a Koth, if we're looking at Oasis. Okay, so just a general more of a layout here. Let's say your team's taking a path for walking this side. So if we're walking, let's say car side, and we know that the enemy team is going to want to path in through car side as well, we can generally, let's say, we could extend first blink here, and then get ourselves postured to where if they do take priority in this room, you're already set up on this angle. You have 2 blinks, but because you're able to jiggle this, this actually gives you a third combat blink. So you technically can have up to like 6 blinks in this fight. If you're, obtaining speed, maybe you even like exert this a little bit later. Application of speed gets you here. We keep walking this. We could extend that blink here so we can have a faster access to backline. This is your general combat, or not your general combat, your general travel, and then we can actually obtain this. We have 2 to 3 blinks here combined with recall so that we can actually stabilize and get back when team reabsorb inside our team if we need to, or we can either move off to like a health pack. But this here will effectively let us enter into fights a little bit earlier, but also too, it'll give us breathing room so that you can actually work, pull time, and like absorb CDs. All right. So another thing here that we're going to talk about is going to be clip management. I think this is really important, especially this not only just dictates you as more of a threat through the entire fight, but just a threat through the lobby. You're a lot more scarier to actually be contested, and it actually opens up for ways for you to just kind of win duels out faster and bring your return to battle timer from your ones a lot lower, and kind of like increase this uptime. So a lot of the time, like if we're going to be looking at initial fights, generally you're sitting there. If we're trying to describe this out, let's say we're looking at a top-down movement. Someone's generally strafing this way, then they kind of strafe out like this and they go this way. If we see movement like this and it becomes super erratic and it's something that we start to struggle with, why are we still shooting through this rather than taking time to actually analyze movement and then move from there? So right now, what I see a lot of people do, so we'll say for the concept of generally how I see most tracers play it is they're in a duel, maybe versus Lucio, they're fighting, they're reloading, they're shooting again, they have to reload, once again, shooting, boom. Generally, maybe this is by kill time. How can we fix this? Well, it's pretty simple, right? Any single time that movements become readable, we can easily just break this down by going, okay, stop shooting, shoot again, maybe we reload, and then we shoot again, and then we can kill here. We can effectively half our time in these kill to time sections just by a simple concept of disciplining ourselves a little bit more through clip management to actually be dealing more over time without having to reload as much, which increases the duel. Because you have to think about it, right? Every single time that damage is put onto you, you need to output the same damage or more to even it out. Otherwise, you're going to be sitting at an HP disadvantage, your recall is going to come out earlier, or you're just not going to end up getting the pick entirely because you're going to have to back away from the duel. This is super important. Other concepts to understand, especially with this on clip management and Tracer, is that in between these, if we're going to look at it really back down to the nitty-gritty aspect of it, if this is a time that you stop, but this is a time that you reload, we already know that you reload during blinks. So this is a time where evasive maneuver can come in, and you're also, if you're applying the same concept here, and then sorry, that was getting a little overwhelming to look at. So if we know that this is just you not shooting here, and then this is your actual first reload, and you're blinking on this, then you're only extending one blink. But if you're reloading and blinking in between here to create evasive measures so that you can actually blink, so you can keep your reload going without taking minimal damage, you're expending one blink here, but two blinks here. So inherently, we can already see that stylistically, this is going to suit you more because it's going to hold you a blink advantage if you're in Tracer duels, as well as this is just going to allow you to traverse map faster and get back into setups and have your return the battle timer actually be more effective when you're winning these duels or if you have to be backing out. And this concept's going to be super important going into a lot of duels. There's areas that you can actually, as well too, if you really want to experiment and really get into habits of this, is understanding too, how does crouching and how do your strafes affect how you aim as well to actually bolster you. Generally, if you're playing against faster targets like Baby Diva or like Lucio, does crouching help give you a benefit to slow your movement so that you can kind of rely a little bit more back to your tracking, or does matching movements favor you more there, or do you think you intake too much damage and it forces you to recall? Really look back and see how how movements are affecting you in these duels, as well as what resources are they forcing, and is it forcing it on an average faster than it should be? And you can kind of discern and say okay, maybe I should try to approach this a little bit differently when I'm fighting versus a Diva to where I'm fighting maybe a Lucio. Especially too with characters that go faster, and how fast Tracer's base movement speed is already. Dueling Lucios that are grabbing walls and whatnot, maybe crouching and then moving it in a little bit occasionally so that you can slow yourself down and kind of rely more to your actual tracking capabilities rather than trying to actually be as evasive. Also as well, slowing your movement down in those fights kind of helps out throw up a little bit more than just kind of the base standard AD strafing and then standard blink set, which gives you a little bit more flexibility in the ones if you really want to be nitty gritty about your movement. Okay. So pulse bomb mechanics, but most importantly, what I'm going to look at is more so the arc of pulse bomb. Right? If we're sitting here and we're looking at how pulse bomb actually operates, and when you're looking at a dead-on rate, pulse bomb kind of moves up in an arc. I don't think this is really any crazy groundbreaking concept for anyone. I think we all kind of know that it kicks up. So generally straight on pulse bombs when you're looking at dead like this, if this is your crosshair, is what we want to try to avoid. If we can hit these are great, but how can we bolster ourselves a little bit more in closer range duels so that we can eliminate the time of travel? Well, if this is what we're looking at standardly, we should be looking at like doing this. So pulse bomb tech, actually the arc of the pulse bomb goes based off of like where you're looking, not actual off a player model. In fights like this, when you're taking like a lower stance, you actually see your arc move like this. So you can actually create more of a direct line by just taking a smaller like look down. And especially too when you're looking at like Briggs, Ana, stuff like that, where you really need to actually get that pulse to shut down, let's say, rally, or to really ensure that a pick happens through transcendence. It's really important that you're able to actually hit these and really try to create the time of travel to be less than what it is. These are fractions of a second or half of a second differences, but these do really make a difference to how the actual pulse bomb operates. And I'll throw like a quick snippet in here of the actual like differences on how those pulse bombs travel. So generally when you see like a general toss, you can see how that arc happens. Now if I look at feet, you can see like even though I'm chucking it a little bit lower, obviously we're looking at distance sake for understanding like how that arc actually operates. But you can see that it directs itself in a more straight line because what's happening is you're seeing that transition like this rather than a transition that kind of like arcs up. So we're creating like a faster travel time as well, a more consistent basis or more consistent line to actually like reach target. Now, how do we actually go about training ourselves on this mechanic? More importantly, not just training are able to pulse at like different rates of like where we look, but how we just like get more consistent about attach rates. I think the way I give is necessarily not encouraged practice by most, as it's kind of, I guess it's kind of like troll, I guess you could say in a way. I would say anytime you're in ranked or you're in scrims, especially too if you're not in metas where pulse is desperately needed and pulse is just an opener just to kind of like gain picks rather than shut something down like rally, just pulse tracer off cooldown. Tracer is one of the smallest targets, one of the fastest moving hitboxes. Practice trying to play for the recall force. Once you have that recall and blink advantage, actually just go for the stick. I guarantee you, if you start getting consistent at sticking tracers, you yourself alone will become a lot more consistent on getting sticks on any other character in the game. We'll probably go into talking about playing duels actually. Go to away. Actually, no, we'll do Nepal. I think Nepal's way better examples. Okay. So, looking at Nepal. We're just going to use this context, for example, because I think this is a really good area to talk about. So generally, when your team's rotating here, you have a couple options, right? You can either go for the really brain dead route, approach from here. You can play for point force, or you can try to path this way and gain this. Generally, if you don't have the priority in this room, the other chase is going to be playing here. So how do we go about this? Well, we know, let's say our Ana or our Zen is playing back here. Generally, poking and jiggle peeking this is really nice, but you don't want to play any more than a soft engage into this room. In fact, you want to try to avoid playing in this room as much as possible until you have advantages. What are those advantages kind of being? Definitely recall force is going to be a big one, but kind of letting their tracer engage you. You can even like step in here, take a playing for the recall advantage is going to be important, right? So stepping in this room is something that we can go for and then play a blink out. And what this essentially does is we can play for a bait. It's kind of like saying like, hey, I'm going to engage, but once like you expend a blink and you're blinking backwards, you kind of give them the thought that you might have priority in this duel. And they're more willing to take and engage. What this does is you can slowly bait them back to your backline, like we talked about Ana being back here, or like a Zen, even like a Brig. And because you bait them back, you're obtaining resource, they are not. And then once you force that recall, and especially too, if you get like this mega pulled out of them as well, then you can even like go in here with a recall advantage, win this duel, and if you not had recall forced out, either you back up. If the mega's back, you take the recharge mega, and then you can keep walking this. You can even technically go for this one right here. And this would actually open up for you to actually harass longer. And if we talk about those clip management aspects as well, to where you're reloading less than them, this gives you so much of a leg up into these duels because you're doing so much more damage in little time that you're increasingly putting out more of a threat continuously in the 1v1 that either they're going to back off and you get to push this a little bit more, threaten this, and then you can just hold this and then bait them back again, and then your team is just playing here. Once you find recall, or not recall, once you find a pulse, maybe you want to drop even here then, because you find this opening, you can start the point force here, and now you have more of a direct line with pulse to their back line, if pulse is like in the equation. These are just a couple, this is a pretty good, not a couple, sorry, this is just a good example, I think, of how to play the second engage on Tracer to where you can bait them back a little bit more instead of taking priority if you're not mechanical Tracers like Snozzler, Psycho, or like King, for example. And especially too, if you're keeping in that idea of clip management and how you want to play, you might be able to then start engaging into rooms like this a little bit more, assuming you're not just running blindly, and force recall a little bit faster and take mega control away from them and push them out more steadily. But with time and practice, that's all going to come into like fruition as you keep playing. So. Okay. Perfect. Only one reset and we're already here. So, looking at how we play the Tracer match and knowing when to ignore is pretty simple in some contexts. So, let's say we're going for a general rotation this way as a team, and you know that their Tracer is, let's say, playing here, or she's going to be playing, let's say, on this side, and then she can just play like the blink over and harass, and maybe she's playing the other side, right? You know, anytime that they're in rotation, they're always set up in a way to harass or look to kind of exploit angles around you and build those angles as the mid fight happens. It's kind of like a triangle. So if Tracer's going to blink here, the rest of their team's here. These are the two angles, but they also absorb and look at both ends of your team connecting to your core. This is the triangle. Naturally, we'll want to try to push this out or prevent it from happening. So back looking at like ball comp when groundwork was getting laid for that, a big concept was knowing when to match and when to ignore. So when long angles come into play, where if this Tracer didn't blink over here or blink over here, and she's running this bridge and you guys have already completed like this rotation pretty much, you guys keep going. You guys just go hit and you run and then you ignore, especially as a Tracer of your own. Maybe you blink over this end and you keep running this, and then you actually have access to their backline. You pull resource like nade, maybe like an amp, whatever that may be, lamp, depending on what the comp is playing. And you just essentially make her a dead teammate in the fight without having to even put resource to her because she's so late. But because like Tracer can like blink over here on either side, or she might just like walk up here and then start contesting you guys in the rotation, these are areas that you're going to see more matches. If she starts this contest here, maybe you fight for her real quick here, push her out, and then hold this mega because you've obtained backline resource. Your team continues to walk. You hold this area, and then once your team's set up, then you can take the blink over. Especially if you force things like recall prior, then you can either go here if they try to meet your team in white room if you have pulse. Maybe you're going this way with pulse. And you're trying to just set yourself up so that you're more of a threat to where they're going to have to like look at you, build out screen time, and they're not actually contesting the rotation of your team. These are going to be areas of like matches that you're going to want to like really strive to like look for, where once you kind of force them away, you find that new angle. More importantly, you really need to understand how do you accomplish the overall goal for what you want. Overall goals can be something as simple as finding a certain resource to even finding a pick or saying, I'm going to force point in the situation. We'll say in a concept of if they're looking to kind of like smash you here, as Tracer, you know, okay, they're going to recall. I'm going to look like I'm rotating this way to get them to think that I'm going to try to force point. I'm going to blink over here and then try to hit their brig when they have rally and pulse and shut down the rally. But then once that's done, because I've now shut rally down, my job is effectively done. What's the next thing I can do? I should be backing up instead of trying to gain kills. Go to point, force the point contest. We can still spray, exert pressure out with just over distance. Your team can stabilize and live with the man advantage, but while they try to like move back for the contest on your flip, your team is pressuring and you have this really, really nice pinch setup without having to actually exert and extend your recall out by staying longer in that fight. these can be kind of identified with areas of understanding. Okay, do they want to match us as DPS? Do they want to hit my tank? Or do they want to go for my backline? Generally, if they want to go something for like your backline, maybe if let's say they're playing Ball, Tracer, Sombra, right? Okay, maybe as Tracer you're sitting around with your backline a little bit more. As soon as Sombra appears, you're gonna help force the Sombra out instant. Then you're gonna force the Tracer out, and now it's just Ball, right? Well, how do we what is our overall goal there? If it's those three that are going for a dive in your backline, you know you can force the other two out with the other two supports. And it's just Ball. Now our overall goal is to try to deal as much damage as we can, chase on Ball just a hair without overextending to kind of whittle him down and make his return to battle timer as long as possible so that your supports can then freely walk. So in that situation, because they're hitting your backline, you're looking to help your backline live. But more importantly, you're also looking to actually escort them and get them propped up into positions that will set them up for the overall long term of the fight. Now, with concepts like that, like sometimes that changes depending on how geometry goes. If you have high ground advantages, if you do not, if they're looking for certain conditions, like can you shut it down with a pulse? Can you just trade a backline and easily just live? There's a lot of concepts that really go into it, but for a general rule of thumb, that's kind of the idea. That's kind of one of the ideas, I should more so say, of how you can approach that. And the more and more you play Tracer, the more and more you figure it out. And especially too, if you self-VOD yourself and go, okay, knowing that I'm accomplishing an overall goal, what should have I looked here for? And it kind of builds yourself out to an area where your decision making gets a little bit stronger each and every time that you play these fights because you're finding new and new ways to approach it.